despite the challenges that we are going through. So I can still see that we still have a low number of students in the platform. So maybe you can just give them around 2 or 3 minutes, then we start our lesson. So let's just be patient for another 2 minutes. We see how they will respond, then we continue. So we'll start our lessons in the next 2 minutes. In the next 2 minutes. Thank you. So welcome back again. I can see now the number is now going up. So I would also wish that the one that we are in, I've seen the Karisa do a good job by inviting members of our class. So please kindly, you can just remind your classmates on the respective classes that we are in that the lesson has just begun. So last week, I think it was one of the lessons that we were able to learn so many things. And it was a constructive one. So we intend to continue and to build up on the things that we have learned. I've seen you build. So Karisa Moses, you can still invite the rest. I've seen you do a good job. So continue reminding them that the class is on. So last week we learned on some things. Amongst them is we were able to distinguish between weather and climate. We also had an opportunity to look at the factors that influence climate. And I remember emphasizing much on this, that any other time we look at climate, many of us would want to see it as one component. Yes, I know that is the case, but that ends up to narrow your thinking on it. We said that weather and climate are very close. And for you to understand climate, you really need to be conversant with the knowledge that we learned in Form 1 on weather, and specifically on the elements of weather. We really spent almost to a term just studying the elements of weather. We began by talking about rainfall, not rainfall. We began by talking about the temperature. We went to cloud cover, humidity, and on all those elements of weather. There was a big reason why we did that. We really wanted you to understand those concepts so that when we get to a topic such as climate and the one that will come as we proceed on, you will have a good background. You will have a good grasp of those information that will help you understand these concepts. So maybe, but to do a recap of what we learned last week, we just need to remind ourselves what we learned so that we can pick up from there. We began by distinguishing between the climate and weather. And I'm saying so because that question is very common. And any other time you see a teacher repeating such a point on some concept, just get to know that those concepts is just trying to repeat himself. He has a big reason why he's doing that. So we can just remind ourselves what we said, the difference between weather and climate, so that we can proceed on. Can anyone remind us what we talked of? Hands up, please. Yes, I've seen Moses. You can unmute yourself and respond to the question.
Yes. So we said that weather is the state of the atmosphere. It is set of atmosphere at a very short time, mainly 24 hours. But as for climate, we distinguish that it is different from weather because it takes a longer period of time, maybe even 10 years. Yes.
Moses, do it really say 10 years? Maybe you can just get it from Bill.
We said that climate is the state of the atmosphere over a long period of time, probably 30 to 35 years.
Go on. Bill has just reminded me of a technicality that we normally see when you people answer your questions in an exam situation. Now, the question is very clear that we've asked the difference between climate and weather. Now, many of us, I don't know for which reasons, they will tell us, they will just begin by defining the two terms. The question is very clear. The question says, distinguish or give the difference between the two, weather and climate. And we said, to remind and to make it clear, and Karisa, listen to this very carefully. I said, when we talk of climate, we are talking of the average weather condition of a given place over a long period of time, normally between 30 to 35 years. We didn't say 10 years. Probably you must have misunderstood the question, the examples I was giving, but to make it clear to everyone, we said climate is the average weather condition of a place over a long period of time. And we said normally between 30 to 35 years. Well, climate, I'm using the word while because I'm differentiating between the two. And I'll tell you in a short while why many of us will normally get it wrong despite having those concepts. And when you talk of weather, it can be really defined as the everyday's experience of the atmospheric condition. It is the everyday's experience of the atmospheric place of a particular place. And when you talk of it is every day, that is a day has 24 hours. So it will take 24 hours for it to be a day. So when we talk of weather, we are basically talking of a duration of 24 hours. But in climate, we are talking of a duration ranging between 30 to 35 years. Karisa, I think it is now very clear.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Just to take the shortest time possible, let's just go through the factors influencing. Maybe you can just have some people reminding us and briefly describing, because I can see a good number, I can see some few individuals who are not in last week's class, but I've seen them.
Teacher,
Yes,
I was asking, there are
yes,
some notes that you gave us, the ones for
yes,
climate 2.
yes.
So I was asking, the notes are for climate 2. So does it mean there's climate 1?
This topic is classified into two. We have climate 1 and climate 2. So
Oh,
the part that we are dealing with right away is climate 1. And I think by today we will have completed the climate 1, so that maybe I'm told you'll be closing school on Friday. I'm not so sure about it, but uh, maybe when we resume these classes, we will begin from climate 2. So nonetheless,
okay.
we can just push on by reminding ourselves, maybe given that the Karisa you are in, you can just tell us one of the factors that influence climate and briefly describe it.
So one of the factors in influencing climate is said that altitude.
Yes,
Yes, that altitude is the height above sea level, and for this altitude I'll talk it in the sense of temperature. So as the saying goes that the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. It says that those places that are in higher altitude areas, like those ones which are in hilly regions or the highland regions, they experience cooler temperatures than in the coastal where the altitude is very low. So the temperatures tend to be higher than the ones in highland regions.
maybe just, but to give an addition to that, and I think it is very good for us. I'm just trying to test on your understanding of this information that will get given to you. Now, I've heard Karisa explained his point on the altitude, and he's just said there is a general concept, there is a general statement that we normally say: the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. Now, I think for you to really talk of that point that we as geography teachers will want to listen is, we all know that the atmosphere is warmed by the terrestrial radiation. And when I talk of the terrestrial, we have the solar insolation, the one the long ray, the long waves and the short waves. Now, the atmosphere is warmed by the terrestrial radiation. And when I talk of the terrestrial, I really want to believe that nobody is lost. Now, it hits the ground. Said we have this mountain, we have this hill, we have this landscape that is as just We have an upland, kind of. We have a mountain, we have a hill. Now, most of the land, and most of these areas that it is hilly, it is a small place. And most of the land is maybe the plain. Now, the same heat that was received in this bigger part, that is the plain, will be required to warm the atmosphere going upwards. Now, maybe at 2 meters above the sea level, the temperature is around 33 or 34, or even sometimes, or some instances, it could be around 35. Now, going upwards, ukienda juu 10 meters ina reduce, ukienda juu tena ina reduce, ukienda tena ina reduce. So that is why a lot of heat is lost to the atmosphere. By the time you get to maybe Mount Kenya, I'm told it is 5199. If I still recall that, 5199. By the time you get to 5,000 kilometers, 5,000 meters, 5 kilometers, that is it. It will have lost a lot of heat. No wonder we say that it is almost impossible to get to the peak of Mount Kenya because it is extremely cold. The temperatures could be as low as negative or even zero. So many of us, or many people, not even many people, it is really impossible under normal circumstances to be able to get to the peak of Mount Kenya because it is extremely low. And we've really explained on that, reason being a lot of heat is lost to the atmosphere. Okay, that is it. And we also talked of, and again, I think there is, I was just trying to recall what we said. One factor, for example, altitude, can really influence up to 5 aspects, 5 elements of weather. When you talk of the cooler, the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. We are talking about temperature. We can also talk of air pressure. Now, somebody can just tell us how these elements called atmospheric pressure can be influenced by altitude. Yes, Mutuma. Mutuma, you can just unmute and tell us that.
Oh, the pressure at higher altitudes is lower than the pressure at low altitudes.
Reason being? You lost?
The column of air that is above the land in higher altitude is lower, is shorter, that is, than the column of air above lower altitudes.
That is very good. That is very good, Mutuma. That is the answer that I really wanted. No, we have a tendency of students when you ask, and especially this area, and I really want to take my time to go through these factors because there is a big tendency of students not to really explain these points as expected. I can use I don't know, an awkward term. Maybe I can say they normally go around. I don't know if that really makes sense to us, and I'll explain that. Now they will tell us altitude will influence air pressure, which I have no doubt about that. That is very correct. Now, when he just tried to give a justification or a reason why the atmospheric pressure will be lower at the high altitude, they normally go around. They'll tell us, the high. They start being confused, and they normally go back to the higher you go, the cooler it becomes, which is not really the case. We want you to hit the point straight. You don't go down. Tell us simply because the column at the high altitude, that is Mount Kenya, the peak of Mount Kenya, the column is very short. Now the column compared to the column, at the lower altitude, maybe at sea level. So the two columns, one is very short and the other one is very long. So this air will press much on, we have a higher weight of air pressing on the lower altitudes. And we really need to train ourselves on how on how we put those points. Otherwise, we'll be losing a lot of marks. As we as teachers, as we mark, we really want to test your understanding on those things. At the same time, you can even explain, I want to open up our minds. We've talked of temperature under the same point. We've talked of atmospheric pressure under the same point, that is altitude. You can even talk about rainfall, that is a raised land. And basically you'll bring in the concept of relief rainfall. Now, when you bring in the concept of relief rainfall, that is, you normally get it at those high altitude regions. I want us to really be, and even humidity, you can talk much, you can talk at almost all the elements of weather. And that is why I said, for you to really say that you've understood the concept on climate, you basically need to have read much on the elements of weather that we did in Form 1. We don't intend to waste much time irrespective of how sensitive the area is. I really thought of maybe taking a short time to maybe remind us and to emphasize on some things. Now, maybe before we continue, unless someone has a question concerning what we did last week. Anyone? Can just raise up your hand, I'll be able to note that. Yes, I've seen Joshua. Joshua?
Shall you say, can you repeat how aspect affects climate?
How aspects, now maybe I will take you through what is aspects and Joshua. Joshua?
Yes.
Yes, I think you know what aspects is. An aspect is the general alignment of a slope to the sun's insolation.
Yes.
Right? Sasa sikia hizi vizuri. We have a mountain in the northern hemisphere. Are we together?
Yes.
And we also have another mountain in the southern hemisphere, right?
Yes.
Yes. We have our sun passing through the equator or within the tropics, right?
Yes.
Now, let's take an example of a sun passing through the equator during the equinox. Then we have our mountain at the northern hemisphere. Now, describe, we have this mountain, huku upande huu na ile upande ingine. We have the sun facing slopes and we have ile palingine ni shadow, sindio?
Yes.
Then in the northern hemisphere, upande wa chini is the one that is facing the sun. Na ile upande wa juu haijafikia because it is where that is where the shadow is casted. Now on the sun, the south facing slopes, in this mountain that is in the northern hemisphere, we have the north facing slopes and we have the south facing slopes, right? Now the south facing slopes will receive the sun's insolation. It will be heated by the sun rays, the sunlight, and therefore those south facing slopes will be warmer than the north facing slopes, right? Now that is in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, we also still have the same mountain, huko chini sasa. Then the same mountain will have the north-facing slope and the south-facing slope. Now, our sun again is still at the equinox, at the equator, passing through the equator. Now, this time, it will be the opposite of what happens in the northern hemisphere. The north-facing slopes this time will receive the sun's insolation, while the south-facing slope is where the shadow will be casted upon. And therefore, the north-facing slope will be warmer, and the south-facing slopes in the southern hemisphere will be
Well,
cooler. Joshua,
yes.
have I helped you to make for it the whole need to make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, fine. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes, I can see nobody is still have a doubt on what we say. Now, today I intended us to cover a very short area under the classification of climates. And again, this is an area full of theories and conspiracies and all sorts of things. You know, the reason being is it is always very difficult. It is very difficult to classify climate. We can even take the example of mango. I've at times felt like I'm getting confused because I've, in a way, tried to classify mango as an arid and semi-arid area, but in some instances, it can really become confusing. Like last year, we really received, even I think, yes, this year, shortly before we broke for the holiday that we have, we had a lot of rainfall. Now, the place that you have always called an arid and semi-arid area now turns to be something else. Mvua inakuwa nyingi tena. And that is why my earlier classification of now saying Mangu was an arid and semi-arid area now changes again. Inakuwa mpaka inakuwa tropical climate. The next year again, maybe pia itakuwa ukame kabisa mpaka unasema hata si ati arid and semi-arid tena, unasema ni arid sasa. The next few years again, climate changes. So utashinda tu ukihangaika tu hivyo. Ukihangaika because there are so many, the parameters that I'll be using then maybe is by using rainfall. But again, there are so many things that you have to consider to classify a climate. And that is why I began by saying it is always very difficult, very and extremely difficult to classify these climates. Because the reason is, in some areas it has transitional zones. I'll just take your minds because I think you must have learned this in primary schools. You must have learned the Sahara Desert and the equatorial climate. We have the two. And we also have a region that is called the transitional zone. Sio ukame, sio Sahara, yenye unajua, yenye ni ukame kabisa, na tena it does not receive a lot of rainfall. Now, in this region whereby it is confusing, Obaigwa, in this area that it is somehow confusing, how will you classify that area that receives both, either the Sahara kind of climate and at the same time it is experiencing the equatorial type of climate? That area, you will not say, we don't have a climatic zone that is called transition. We don't have it. Will you say it is under the equatorial climate, or you will say it is under the desert? Now, what will you tell us? Now, that is why we've said we have this problem of when you try to classify, you will have some challenges because of the transitional zones that in somehow they try to overlap. Utasikia sikia hivi kidogo you are in a desert, and at the same time utasikia ile mvua unapata, it is an equatorial climate, and then you will have a problem. But again, I know we have good geographers here. I know Shem is one of them, and Mutuma, Canon, Dan, Dennis, everyone here. I know them. I've really interacted with many of us, and I know your capabilities. Therefore, help us in your time. Help us to understand better on the classification. Maybe you can just come up with a bigger way of explaining things to us so that we can understand them. Now, as I said, it has really brought some challenges. And where we have challenges, like explaining the solar system, like explaining which other area that we have theories. Yes, we have explaining fold mountains. We have theories there. We also have the earth movements. We also have theories. Now, when we have areas that tries to bring some challenge, we will have theories. And again, for the area that we are talking about classification, we also have three theories that just try to explain somehow on how we can classify these climates. And we have three classifications. I hope you are following up on your notes. We have the first one, Thornway. That is THORNWAITE, the Thornway classification. The second one is the Köppen climatic classification. Köppen is KOPPEN. And the one that is commonly used, which is called the Miller's classification. That is the most common one that we use to classify climate. Sorry. Sorry, now let's go to the most common one that is commonly used. And I think much as you have notes, we have not discussed on the classification of climates. This is the one that I think it is in your minds. Areas around Lake Victoria, it is very hot, and at the same time, we have a lot of rainfall. Areas around Mandera, it is very hot and dry. So that is what Miller's tried to talk about. Now, I'll take you through what Miller's tried to reason. In the classification under the Miller's classification, he used two components. The first component is temperature, that is the major group. He used temperature to classify the major groups and precipitation to classify the subdivisions that falls under the first one. And the first one we talked about is temperature. I've said the most common one is the Miller's classification. And Miller's is the MILLAR, and Miller's reasoning was this way. He used temperature to classify the major groups. He also used precipitation to classify the subdivisions. And that is why we have the hot climates, we have the warm temperate climates, we have the cool temperate climates, we have the cold climates. Now, if you look at those classifications, you will realize that he used temperature as the main to identify the main groups. Now, if you want to talk about the cold climates, that is temperature per se. Then, if you want to get more on those things that is learned there, you will use precipitation, that is rainfall or any other form of precipitation, to understand on those major groups as indicated by temperature. And lastly is we have the Arctic climates. I once saw a question that asked you give the main areas under the Miller's classification. Give the main climatic regions under Miller's classification. When such a question is asked, then it will be so easy. You just tell us number one, the hot climates. Number two is the warm temperate climates. Number three is the cool temperate climates. Number three is the cold climates. And finally, we have the Arctic climate. It'll be so easy. Now, we will be able to get back to those details of the hot climates, the cool temperate climates, and the one that we have just listed. But today we are in Kenya. We are in Kenya and we really need to understand our country better. Where you are in, I know most of us are in Nairobi. As a geographer, as a good geographer, you need to be able to have an idea of what happens in Turkana. Hata kama hujaienda huko. You just have to know what happens in around the coast. Hata kama hujaienda huko. So we want to talk about the distribution and the characteristics of climatic regions of Kenya. Now, are we able to get to, can we access an atlas? Hope so. And if you are not able to access it, we have, you can look at your textbooks, any area that we have the climatic regions of Kenya. Now, it is very important for you to have those ones because it will be so easy for me, given that given that I may not be able to really create an impression, but I'll try much as I can. Now, the first classification is, maybe I can just use those classifications, then we just create an impression. We have the first classification that is called a modified equatorial climate of the coast. I think if you listen keenly to the wordings of those climatic regions in Kenya, there is something that comes to your mind. One is, it says it is a modified equatorial climate, which means it is not the original equatorial climate that we know that falls somewhere at around Zaire, Cameroon, Nigeria, and those countries in West Africa. It is one that is modified. And number two, we are told of the coast. I don't want to ask a question that can be an insult to your brains, I cannot ask you this question. What modifies the climate of the coast? It is so obvious. We have the Indian Ocean. Now, ideally, that place should not be raining. But because of the factor that we explained earlier, and maybe someone can remind me of that factor. I think a good number of factors. But I want two that normally comes straight when you talk of the nearness to the coastline. I think I've seen Lemmy.
Nearness to water bodies.
One is nearness to the water body. We also have another one. Bill.
The shape of the coastline.
Yes, the shape of the coastline. And I think this is the one that carries more weight because Obaigwa,
Continentality.
Yes?
Continentality.
Yes, continentality.
Continentality.
Yes. I'm in total agreement with those 2 points. But I think the one that carries more weight is the nature of the ocean, the configuration of the ocean, the ocean. You know, it is irregular, and therefore the onshore wind, as it blows inland, it brings in some rainfall. Now, this rainfall will modify the climate. Ideally, it should have been like Mogadishu, where it is extremely hot and dry. But again, the ocean, which is irregular, brings some modification to the coast. I am told that it extends from Vanga in southeast of Lamu. That is where it extends. Now let's look at the characteristics of this region. The first region is the modified equatorial. I also want to help you have an idea of what we'll be testing. Next time we have there are 7. There are 5 regions. There are 7 regions in Kenya. Now this is how we can ask you that question. We can draw the map of Kenya and try to sketch out on those regions. Now we can put somewhere some region along the coast that tunaweka X. We can ask you this question. Identify the climatic region X. Ama tuone kwamba hiyo ni swali ya upuzi sana. It is a very cheap one, especially to Mangu students. Naweza kuwa wajana tukasema give the characteristics of the climatic region marked X. We will say give the characteristics of the climatic region marked X. Now we won't really talk about the region X. Now Obaigwa.
Yes.
I've seen your hand up. You want to tell us the characteristics of the region?
I forgot to lower it.
Okay, fine. Nonetheless, you can give us one of the characteristics. I know you have been to the coast, right?
Yes.
Yes, especially Mombasa. You can tell us one of the characteristics in those areas.
They have a very high climate. They have a high temperature.
Yes, you've corrected yourself. Now, please. And I know you are very smart students. in an exam situation, we have a table, and you can refer to your table if you have certificates from 2. There is a table that classifies temperature, whether it is very high, it is high, it is moderate, it is cool, or it is cold. Because, and that table will help you a big deal. Unajua hii topic wanafunzi wengi wanaiogopa sana, kwa sababu it has some figures like 27 degrees, you have 10 degrees, na unachanganyikiwa sasa hii 10 ama 15 ama 27 ama 31 ya wapi? You need to be smart. Don't quote those values. Usijaribu kusema 27 ama 28 ama 20 ngapi. Yours is just but to tell us. And I think the temperature is in Mombasa is around 27 somewhere there. Now this temperature falls under the category of high, not very high. Very high ni 35 huku kwenda juu Obaigwa. So ungeanguka kwa sababu umesema very high. So it is around 27 somewhere there. So it is high, not very high. So one of the answer, yes, and I think that was a good trial. You've not read from somewhere, you've not been taught. It was just from your experience. Now, the answer then therefore is the temperatures are high throughout the year. It receives high temperatures throughout the year. Go there, January, February, yes, throughout the year. The second characteristic is it really does not have any dry season. There is no dry season that we can say this season it is very dry. So rainfall is almost there through the year. But again, we have the hottest month being December and January. If you've been to Mombasa during the month of December and through January, it will be very hot. Yes, number one is there is no dry season. Number two is the area receives high temperature. And the high temperature will normally fall in between December and January. And you know that about the perihelion and the aphelion, the one that we learned in Form 1. Humidity is high throughout the year. You know, humidity is it is normally given in percentage, either 10%. Please don't give us the 10%. You will get it wrong. Just tell us humidity is high throughout the year. I'm just trying to make it as simple for us to really understand these concepts. And number three, the last one is the area receives double maxima rainfall regime. Now listen to this. The area receives a double maxima rainfall regime. Now look at, and if you don't have, you can just try to create an imagination. For example, it rains between the month of, maybe you can just use the example that we have, May. From May, it was a little bit dry in the month of March and April, but we still had some rainfall. Lakini rainfall now begins to go up, to be high. Now rainfall inapanda juu kabisa, May inapanda juu tena, June, July inaanza kushuka chini, August inaenda chini, September pia inaenda chini kabisa, inaenda hapo mpaka 10. Na May ilikuwa peak, ilikuwa around hapo 250. Alafu tena inaanza tena upya. From September inaanza kupanda kidogo. Then October inaenda peak mpaka around 150 hapo 200. November pia inaenda lakini imeanza kushuka chini. By December inaanza kushuka chini tena. January inashuka chini. February inashuka chini. March inashuka chini. Now you will realize that we have two rainfall maximums. We have two maximums. One during the month of May, we have the maximum rainfall. Alafu inaanza kushuka chini. Hiyo bar graphs, the one that we did in Form 1, inaanza kushuka chini. Alafu tena ingine inaanza kupanda from the month of September. Na inaenda peak October. That is what we say it has double, you know, there are two. Double maximum rainfall regime. One, the first maxima in May, and the second maxima in the month of October. Anyone from Mombasa in this group? Yes, Karisa. Moses?
Yes.
Can you confirm to us if that is the position?
What?
What are you responding to? You come from Mombasa, right?
Yes.
I am told we have a lot of rainfall during the month of May.
Yes.
And also during the month of October.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. So that is a confirmation or a resource person that is confirmed to us that indeed what we are saying is very true. Now the first one we are done with. You know this is geography, and we'll only ask you about 4 of them. And I think if you have others, you can add. And again, this region will, before we get to the next one, this region will receive a high rainfall. But again, it does not get to the rainfall that we know of the tropical and not the tropical, equatorial climate. You know, this one is just but a modified one. It is a modified one. It does not, its rainfall does not get to the one that we know of some place in Zaire, some place in Congo, or any other country that we know of. So it is just but a modified one. So it does not really receive the amount of rainfall that is received in the equatorial climate. The second one is modified equatorial climate of Lake Victoria Basin. From the word again, you can really try and figure out which place we are talking about. I have seen someone from these places. Where is he? Someplace in Lake Victoria Basin. Now this is the area that covers the previous Nyanza province and some parts of Western, around Busia somewhere there. So Busia and most parts of the Nyanza province, this area, and even some parts of Kisii, they experiencing this type of climate. Now the question now comes to us: ukienda huko, when you get there, what type of the characteristics of those climatic? What is the characteristics of those climates? The one that we have said, modified equatorial climate of the Lake Victoria Basin. Now, just like I said, we can draw some sketch of Kenya, then we sketch in some place up around Lake Victoria, na tunaweka W. It is either we ask you what is identify the climatic region W, or give 3 or 4 characteristics of the climatic region mark W. Very easy, very easy. Now this time the rainfall, not temperature is moderate. It is neither very high, yenye hatujasema, tulisema ya Mombasa ni high tu peke yake. Yeah, now the one for this place, in some place in Kisumu, some place in those areas. I've never been to most of those areas. Now, if you get to those areas, you'll find that the temperatures are moderate. Now, I can just give you the values, but I really don't really go for that. 20 to 26. Please don't quote those values. Please don't. This is just enough for you to say the air receives moderate rainfall. Enough for you to score a mark. Ukiweka 25, ama uweke, you say moderate, maybe I can just use an example. Now, we have asked students to give characteristics of the climatic region X. Now, X, we can identify ni modified equatorial climate of the Lake Victoria Basin. Now, if this student says the area receives moderate temperature, very correct. Na kwa akili yake anaona moderate hivi, nikiweka 18 sio mbaya. Lakini nikienda kwa hiyo table nimewambia it is in certificate. I think I don't know the page, but I know it is in certificate book 2. Values ya moderate ni between 21 or 20 to 27. Atakuwa ameanguka irrespective of the fact that he said moderate, of which amepata, lakini hiyo values tu peke yake imemwangusha. So please desist from giving us those values. Just tell us moderate rainfall. You'll get your mark. Hata kama ni exam gani, you'll get your mark. The second characteristic is there is no real dry month. Hakuna ati ile mwezi ati hii mwezi ni ukame kabisa. No one. So I've said number 2 is there is no real dry. It is a characteristic ni ukweli. One minute. Now we were talking about the region. We've said one is there is no real dry month. And number 2 is the area receives a moderate moderate temperature. And number 3 is again, this area receives double maximum. And I've really taken my time to explain to us what do we mean when we say the area receives 2 double maximums. so it receives 2 as explained earlier. Now number 3 is the last one is it is the humidity again. You know, most of these points are very related to the one that we saw of the coast. Humidity again is very high. High rainfall of about 1500 millimeters, but please, no, it is not high, it is moderate rainfall. Now, I've also seen your book, KLB, and no, certificate is very correct. I have seen your book says heavy rainfall. Please, 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 in under climate, we don't say heavy rainfall. Heavy rainfall peke yake inakuja wakati unasema mambo ya field work. Field work, you can say some of the problem that you faced in the field was heavy rainfall. Now, heavy can only be used under field work. But when you are talking about climate, please never, and get this, and I think it is good for me that I was reminded of this point when I saw from your books. The book says it is heavy rainfall, which is very wrong. The moment you say heavy rainfall and you are answering a question on climate, you definitely get it wrong. You say moderate, high, low, those ones. Don't say heavy, and those ones. Please don't. That is number 2. Those are the 2 classifications. I can see time is far much spent, and we'll just rush through because I want us to complete climate 1. Number 2 is number 3. We've talked of the one that for the coast, modified equatorial climate of the coast. We've also talked of the modified equatorial climate of the Lake Victoria Basin. The third one is the modified equatorial climate of the northwestern borders. Yeah, have you heard me? I've said modified equatorial climate of the northwestern borders. Now, this is the climate that is normally experienced in areas around Karasuk, Karasuk, and the northeastern parts of Uganda. Those are the areas. And I think if you have your textbooks, you'll be able to locate that. Please kindly spare your time. Identify those areas. Now, this one, like any other modified equatorial climates, the temperatures are high. Now, the temperatures here are now high. This area receives convectional rainfall. All these ones, the one for Mombasa, the one for Kisumu, the one for the northwestern borders, they all receive convectional rainfall. We have a common answer. Both areas receive convectional rainfall. Hakuna relief hapo. Then unlike the other 2, most months in this modified equatorial climate of the northwestern borders, most months are dry. Most months are dry. Kuna miezi yenye ni kame kabisa, very dry. Now, the area also receives, maybe you can just say, the total amount of rainfall. When you do the totals, it will be at somewhere around 850 pale. Now, 850 is a little bit low if you are talking of an equatorial climate. But again, wide north of Lake Victoria, this place could have been an arid and semi-arid. But because of the influence of the Lake Victoria, this semi-arid is somehow modified. And now we cannot say it a modified desert because a modified desert ni inakuwa inaenda kuwa mbaya zaidi. But now this one, the climatic factors have been kind of favored positively. Kuna mvua kubwa kidogo, kuna some high temperatures, humidity pia sio mbaya, ni average up around 50. So it is kind of modified. But again, it does not really stand the name, the equatorial tag that it has. So the areas here are at around 850. Now, number 4, we have little to talk about this one because it is a small area. Then we have another area that is called the modified tropical climate. Now, it is a tropical, yes, but it is somehow modified by the influence of Lake Victoria. This is the area that normally falls under the highlands of the Rift Valley. Now, these areas include those areas. They include some parts of Nandi, some parts of, yes, Obaigwa.
It is also called subtropical climate.
Yes, it's also called subtropical climate. Now we are talking of those many parts of some place in Kericho, some place in Kisii, some place in Nandi, even some place in some parts of Limuru. You know, it is a tropical climate, yes, but it has been modified by the fact that it is sitting close to a water body, not really close, but somewhere it is adjacent to those water bodies. Now the temperatures here are cooler than the expected tropical climate. Now it is enough for you to say the temperatures are cooler. It earns your mark then. When you say the temperatures are cooler, then it is enough for you to score. No, I've said, I've really discouraged all of us. And please, I'm just repeating it again. I have really tried to discourage you people from giving us the values, 10, 20, 30, those values, please. They'll make your answers wrong. It is enough for you to say moderate, high, very high, just enough. Now, number 2 is, it is a highland. And when we have an island, it is always very correct. So easy for us to know the type of a climate that we experience here. It is, which type of a climate rainfall do we receive in these areas?
Convection.
Convection? Newton. Have I heard you say it is convection?
Relief.
Yes, it is so automatic. It is a relief. And that is answer number 2. Very easy. Yes, it is relief. Then again, this area receive double maximum, double rainfall relief, double rainfall regimes. The area receive double maximum of rainfall regimes. Moja ya May na ingine tena ya October. That's like we have it in the coast. The area receives moderate humidity. Humidity pale, it is moderate. The annual range of temperature there. The annual range of temperature is 5 to no, I've said we don't give 5 or 10. You say low, the annual range of temperature, just that way. Iko chini. Low, the annual range of temperature. Rainfall in these regions are normally caused by the southeast trade winds. As simple as that. And then those are the main ones. I think we still have another one before we go to the one that are so obvious. We still have the number 5. We call it tropical climate of Narok and South Kwale and Taita areas. I've said the tropical climates of the Narok and southern Taita and Kwale areas. Please, it has even given us names of some places. Watu wenye hawajui Narok, tafadhali enda kwa Atlas, tafuta pale Narok iko. Na hiyo climate ina extend mpaka some parts of Taita. Na inaenda mpaka huko chini, huko pale pa Kwale huko. If you don't know where Taita is, if you don't know where Kwale is, if you don't know where the Narok is, please go and find out from your Atlas. Now, this is the area that we have it. This is the rainfall that we have it around those places. Characteristics: it received double maximum, double maxima regimes. Your answer to it cuts across many points. It cuts across many regions. Double maxima regimes in a cut across. Then another one is they receive some bits of rainfall, basically due to the relief rainfall. It is because of the relief rainfall. And number 6, or yes, almost the second last one, is the tropical continentals. Ama kama upendi hiyo, the one that we are normally is called semi-desert climates of the central and the northern areas. It's called the semi-desert. It is a semi-desert climate of the central and northern areas. Hiyo iko wapi Ubaigwa? Hata kwa jina tu, It is semi-desert na iko central na northern areas. Iko Mandera, Moyale, Marsabit, very true. Garissa, very true. Machakos, very true. Kajiado, very true. Kitui ni ukweli. So tumesema central. Central inachukua hiyo Makitui, Makueni, Kajiado, Machakos. Alafu tukisema northern inaenda huko juu. Inaenda Moyale, Mandera, those ones. I think from those wordings we can really know where we are talking about. Najua wengi wanatoka huko. Ubaigwa. Wewe ni huko?
Yes. Hapana.
Yes, I know many of us, their rural homes, they come from those regions. Temperatures are very high, not very high, they are high. Inakwanga hapo 27, hapo 26 hapo. So temperatures are high. That is number 1. Yes, the skies are very clear. Mnakubali tu na wenye wanatoka, nikisema uongo mnasema mwalimu, I think there. But I think I've been to most of those areas, and I can attest that the skies are generally clear. They have large diurnal range of temperatures. Usiku ni baridi. Mchana the temperatures are high. 27 usiku, around hapo 16, 17, 18 hapo. If you do the diurnal range, unapata hapo ni 12. So 12 ni large. So we have large diurnal range of temperature. Now the areas are generally dry, and they receive less amount of rainfall. No, these points, these characteristics, these are characteristics you can even give from just knowing these areas. If you know areas such as Kitui, Machakos, Kajiado, those of us who live in Kitengela, you are not in Nairobi, you are in Kajiado. Yes, you can just tell us what you normally experience, the dust and there's so many things. The skies are very clear. The large diurnal range of temperatures, that it means mchana temperatures are very high, usiku temperatures are very low, right? Yes. Then again is another point is we can just say the area receive less or low amount of rainfall. Wanasema 500 lakini nimesema mambo ya 500 na 700 msiseme hizo. Finally, the last one. It is called the deserts. Now, the one that we were talking about was a semi-desert. Now, this one is a desert climate of the central northern areas. It is the desert of the central northern areas. We are talking of Wajir and Lodwar. I'm not so sure if you have anyone from these areas. They are rural homes. They come from these areas. Anyone? Moses, have you been to any of these places, Lodwar and Wajir? What is your imagination of these two areas?
Low humidity.
Low humidity, hiyo nakubaliana na wewe na it is an answer. What else?
Cloudless skies.
Obaigwa, yes, it is very true. It is the skies are very cloudless. Now another imagination na nakubaliana tu bado.
High temperatures during the day and low temperatures during the night.
Maybe yes, I think hapo umechanganya points mbili. Unasema tu ya kwanza high temperatures una score. Alafu ya pili unasema large diurnal range of temperatures. Unajua useme ya mchana na usiku umeenda point nyingine. Unanipata? Karisa? Yes, when you try to bring in what happens during the day and what happens during the night, your concept there then there will be much of the diurnal range of temperature. I've seen the Joshua again, he wants to tell us something.
Do you say it is the temperatures are high or very high?
It is high, not very high.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, ni 30. 30 ni ngapi? 30 ni very high. Joshua?
Yes.
Yes, maybe to clarify, it is 30. And 30 now, 30 Nanzanga, very high Nanzanga from 30 kwenda juu. So the temperatures there are very high.
Thank you.
Yes. Rainfall, very low. Yeah, usiseme mambo ya 250, hiyo 250 itakuchanganya. Wachana na hizo na mafigures kabisa, values wachana nazo. There again, I think it is Obago who talked of we have low humidity, which is very strong, which is very common, very true. We have sandstorms, which is very common. Obago ukienda huko unapata sandstorms inakufunika, tunashangaa huyu kijana mwenye alikuwa anatufuata ameenda wapi? That is it. And finally, we have what we call sporadic rainfall. Kinywa, I think
Yes.
I've seen you somewhere. You wanted to add something?
No.
Okay, fine. No, Kinywa is one of my students that ukiwaona anaweka mkono juu ni kama kuna kitu ya kusema. Maybe amepoteza. I think I was talking about, yes.
What is that sporadic rainfall?
When we talk of sporadic rainfall, from nowhere, all of a sudden, unapata mvua kubwa that lasts between 5 to 15 minutes.
Oh.
yenye inanyesha kubwa kabisa mpaka hiyo flash floods inakuwa. So that is what you call sporadic rainfall. Ni mvua tu, hata uwezi ona mawingu kuja nini, unashangaa tu imenyesha. That is what we call sporadic rainfall. Sporadic rainfall. So that is what we can say about climate 1 Obaigwa, and many of us climate 1 inaisha hapo.
Ala.
Imeisha. Next time sasa tutakuja kwenda kwa climate 2. Hasa kujua dunia vile iko. So I think yes.
Do you have the notes?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Maybe I can send to. I
Google
will send
Classroom.
through. I will send via what was it called? Ile yetu ya. Yes.
Google Classroom.
Yes. Google Class. Yes, I'll send through Google Class.
Yes.
Ni rahisi kabisa. This topic is very easy, and naomba 20. Which year are you doing KCC now?
23.
23.
2023. I really hope that it will feature during your exam, and I know it normally comes in section B. Section B is 25 marks, 25. And this one you can sweep everything. So long as you have really taken your time to go through those work. However, I think that is the end of our lesson. What is very important for us is, and I repeat again, and I think it has really costed some of your marks during an exam situation. We can be distinguished, can you distinguish? And we will be using the word while. Number 2, those factors that influence climate. Please understand each and every one of those factors. I was telling you last time that the way KCSE is being set nowadays, it has really shifted. We no longer ask you any 3, or you say explain any 3 factors that influence climate. We are no longer saying that. We will tell you explain how the following factors influence. Hata moja tunaweza sema explain how altitude. Explain how altitude influences 1, atmospheric pressure, 2, temperature. Each one 2 marks, 2 marks. Hapo unaanza kuchanganyikiwa. Explain how aspects influences climate. Utaanza kuchanganyikiwa. We no longer ask you to give. Najua utaenda kusema mambo ya human activities yenye unapenda hiyo. So please take your time to go through all those factors. It was there, I think ilikuwa last year. Yeah, ilikuwa. Na wenye walifanya hiyo swali walipita. Just as I said, I know you are good students. You will go through your work. Just as someone has requested that I provide the notes, I'll do without hesitation. I will send them through the platform that we've discussed. However, I really want to take this opportunity to thank every one of you. But I'm disappointed somehow. I think the participants today are not so encouraging. Last time we were about 80, 90, 96. But leo nimeona inacheza hapo 36, 35. Mpaka saizi wengine wametoka. Mko 24. So please remind your friends that next time we have a lesson, they just avail themselves. I've also seen that Lemmy is requesting that I provide the notes for South class. I will provide it for your class again, Lemmy. Any other question before we call it a day? I think none. Just we normally say, continue being good students. COVID-19 is real. You just play your role. Just wash your hands, keep distance, and wear mask if you travel to some other place. Otherwise, we can just say, see you. Let's meet. Stop.